Hello, Hospitality 3004. Today we're going to be talking about social responsibility. This will be relatively short because really what I'm wanting to do is just kind of give you a little bit of a brief overview about sort of how we keep things in perspective between social responsibility, corporate social responsibility, and strategic management. I'm sure that you have talked about this before. You would have discussed it in sustainable tourism. You certainly would have seen this idea of how corporate social responsibility is people, profit, planet. And I gave you a slightly different graphic here, simply because it details what is meant by the environmental impacts, the social, the economic, just as a little bit of a reminder to you. So you may want to refer back to this and how they overlap a bit. So of course we have the economic overlapping with the social. That often impacts we're talking about the local economies, we're talking about the people who we're employing and how we're training them and getting them workplace ready, all of those sorts of things. But you can certainly refer back to this graphic as you'd like. So I just wanted to talk about how this has developed within our industry. I'm going to give you a couple different, I think 4 or 5 different examples. So really, in the hospitality and tourism industry, probably the first company that was really prevalent in corporate social responsibility was McDonald's. Okay, so McDonald's established Ronald McDonald House Charities in 1974. If you're unfamiliar with them, essentially what they do is they assist with children who have severe illnesses and need to be hospitalized. And of course, very often they're hospitalized for several weeks or several months. And the families can't always, first of all, afford that treatment or afford to be near them if they live in a remote area. So essentially what Ronald McDonald House does is they make sure that there is a place for these families to stay together while these children are receiving their care. This has obviously grown. I mean, it started in the US, which is no surprise, and it has grown, and now they have over 7,000 locations worldwide. They're here in Australia. But this, I would say, this occurred long before we had the idea of corporate social responsibility, okay? CSR was not a keyword, a fancy thing that we all used to talk about back in the 70s. So McDonald's was rather at the forefront of thinking about this sort of thing. Now everybody is kind of expected to practice CSR. Most companies put out a CSR report, or part of their annual report includes a CSR section. So I'm going to talk about a couple of other examples for you guys. Some of these may be a surprise, some of them may not. Okay, so Walt Disney. For those of you who may have been to Disney on the class or been there for an internship, you certainly are familiar with the fact that Disney is really big into donations. They because of the whole, Disney is the place where a dream comes true. They welcome a lot of people, particularly, again, a lot of sick children or a lot of people from Make-A-Wish who their real wish is to go to Disney. So they donate a lot of money. A lot of that is, of course, in kind. So, vacations to Disney. So $400 million to nonprofits each year. They also have a really big program for their cast members. It's called Volunteers. And so the idea is that cast members donate their time doing various different community service projects throughout the year. I think the last time I saw this, which was several years ago, they were up to about 3 million hours of service per year, and they're striving to reach 5 million hours of community service this year. So now, I want you, as I'm going through and talking about this, the idea is we would really like to have CSR as part of our corporate strategy, okay, and ideally as part of our daily operations. So for instance, Ronald McDonald House, that is obviously very separate from the way that their restaurants operate. Walt Disney, you're talking about, yes, welcoming people in and paying for their trips when they're in the parks. Volunteers, this is done in employees' off time. So this is really not directly associated with how Walt Disney is running their business, okay? However, I'm going to give you a couple of examples of companies that are making this an ultimate part of their business plan. So I'm not sure how many of you buy Tom's shoes. I'm not sure exactly how popular they are here in Australia. I do know that they sell them here. But if you are familiar with Tom's shoes, they have this program called One for One. And essentially you buy these shoes, and for every one pair that is purchased, they donate a pair to someone in need. That is part of their corporate strategy. So they have built that into their pricing model. They've built that into their distribution model. So for them, CSR is in everything that they do. Okay, so they're kind of one of the real ultimate leaders in doing this. They also have this global giving fund, and so again, with the profits that they make, they invest in jobs, they invest in entrepreneurship opportunities in disadvantaged areas, they invest in other initiatives. So as you see here on the right hand side, you can see that they are talking about the Tom's COVID-19 Global Giving Fund. So basically they're going to be putting a third of their net profits into that to help people who are affected by the pandemic. So Tom's probably one of the best examples of a company that uses their CSR within their entire business plan, within all of their corporate strategies. There are very few companies that do that. Now, Starbucks has really been moving in the direction, I mean, they're certainly not at the Tom's level, but they are certainly moving in the direction of making CSR a larger and larger proportion of their operations and really putting it into all of their strategic planning initiatives. So for instance, they have this program called their Sustainable Coffee Challenge. And what they're really doing, I don't know how familiar you are with coffee, but a lot of coffee is produced either in places that use slave labor or child labor, and they pay them very poorly. Very often they're not paid like a livable wage. So the idea is to actually make sure that all of the coffee that Starbucks is purchasing is ethically produced, so no child labor, no slave labor, that sort of thing, that farmers are actually being paid a fair wage. And then they are also trying to move towards investing back with those farmers that supply them by providing them financing, by providing them trees, actually replanting, providing them, those resources that they need. So that's what they're doing with so this really affects their supply chain and their production, okay? But then here, within their stores, they are looking towards how they can hire disadvantaged populations, or populations basically that need a little extra help. So for instance, they have these goals of hiring 10,000 refugees and 25,000 military veterans, because very often those two groups are at a disadvantage because they don't have a large enough resume, they don't necessarily have the skills that they need in some cases. So trying to bring those populations into the workforce. So this is really the way that CSR should be done, again. So they are implementing CSR into their supply chain, into their production, into their human resources, obviously into their training, because they're going to have to train, refugees and military veterans potentially in a very different way. So you can see that Starbucks is going in a direction of really needing to put more into their actual CSR strategic planning. And then I wanted to give you one other example. Marriott Hotels, there's lots of different hotel companies that I could have given you. And I mean, we're all familiar with the towel reuse programs and this, that, and the other thing. But I just thought that this was an interesting one that you may not be familiar with. So Marriott Hotels has established this Serve 360 program, and basically all of their CSR falls under Serve 360, I believe. So there's two things in their Serve 360. There's more to it than just what I'm mentioning, but there's two things I wanted to mention to you. One was that they've really put this emphasis recently, a lot of the hotels, on human trafficking. And because obviously, if you're moving people around illegally, you are often having to move them through places. If you're crossing state borders or internationally, you're obviously going to be traveling with them. So one of the things that Marriott has done recently has been training all of their employees to recognize the signs of human trafficking and how to deal with it. And they've actually included this in all of their recruitment and all of their training. Now, I guess it's very hard for them to determine their return on investment. I really don't know. I don't know that they can say, oh, well, we've saved this many hundred people last year. I don't know. They don't publish those sorts of things. But obviously, they're trying to work with that. But one thing that I saw on their Serve 360 was that they are partnering with leading nonprofits to ensure workplace readiness to diverse populations. So this is, in theory, a good idea, but it doesn't go as far as it could. So while Starbucks is making the commitment to hire refugees and to hire military veterans, Marriott is saying, yes, we're giving money and we're partnering with nonprofits to make sure that women and minorities and other disadvantaged groups have some training, but they're not making the commitment to hire them. So I hope that you can see the difference between giving money to something that is unrelated to your business, such as run a McDonald's house. Okay, that's pretty unrelated to fast food, and then there's the commitment to, okay, well, we'll help these other populations, sort of like, Marriott Hotels, they'll give money to make people workplace ready, but they're not actually committing to hiring them. Okay, and then you do have like Starbucks, who is actually committing to hiring these people. So there's different levels at which CSR is actually implemented into strategic planning, and how much these different kinds of companies actually commit to these things. So I just wanted to make it something that you were aware of and that you sort of realize these differences, because this is, in my opinion, part of the reason that CSR tends to get a bad rap, is because a lot of times it's companies saying, oh, well, here, we'll just give our money away, but we're not going to actually implement this directly into our businesses. So just something for you to think about, be aware of. Most companies now have a VP of CSR. Now, whether or not, again, how that person is choosing to implement that strategy within the company and how much buy-in you get from the top management team does vary from company to company. But this is, again, something you should be aware of when you are going out and finding a job and deciding where you want to work. Okay, thank you so much, everybody. I will see you next time.